All right, we are live. Thanks for tuning into the Sheet Metal Shaping podcast, where we discuss the pursuit of sheet metal shaping through traditional coach building techniques. My guest today on the show, all the way from Calgary, Alberta, my fellow Canadian, Mr. Brandon Hegedus. My man, how are you?
How's it going, man?
I'm so excited. Okay, so for the listeners, I've been following this guy on Instagram for a while now. I've seen some of his YouTube stuff, and his work is just, I don't know, it's absolutely spectacular. So I'm so excited that we had a chance to tag up, and I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thanks, man.
This is really good.
It's odd to be on a sheet metal shaping podcast when I'm not.
When you're not a sheet metal shaper.
Yeah,
that's the whole point. So, like for today, and this is like him and I were chatting behind the scenes, right? And basically, the whole point for the episode today is to talk about what you're building. And like you're doing bodies from carbon fiber, which I think is a very interesting material. It's gaining in popularity. Obviously, other people are doing on the show are doing bodies in aluminum and steel and so on. And really, like whether you build it out of fiberglass, carbon fiber, aluminum, plastic, Tupperware, it doesn't matter what you build your cars out of. The fact that, you know, builders are on the show and they're talking about the things that, you know, that they're building, all of those tendencies bind together and form what we know as the coach building craft, right? So I'm real excited you're here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
So tell the folks a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you're working on.
Okay, well, my name is Brandon Hegedus, and I'm just a regular guy in a garage. I'm nothing fancy or spectacular. This is it, like what you see in the background here. Like this is me. I've got a car hiding under the box / workbench there. There's a car hiding under that. Yeah, I kind of started working on stuff as a kid. Like my dad had a little single car garage, you know, out back, and I spent all my time there. I mean, it was impossible for my mom to get me in for dinner and get me to go to bed. And, you know, a Saturday morning, I'd be up at 6 or 7 o'clock and in the garage, never slept in, you know, nothing like that. And yeah, I would just tinker, right? Teach myself how to use the bandsaw and the table saw and the welder.
And now, gosh, look what you're doing. So you're building replica Ferraris out of your garage. And as your Instagram says, you don't do this with any fancy tools and you don't do this with a crew. And as you just mentioned, you're just a regular guy. Shed some light on this for us.
Well, I don't know. It just kind of started with the small stuff, right? Actually, funny enough, I used to make guns when I was a kid. You know, every boy's into, you know, guns and stuff like that. And so that's kind of where it all started. I got my hands on like a gun magazine one day, and I thought, oh, that's so cool. And so it's flipping through, and I'm looking at little photos in the back, the little, you know, the for sale ads, I guess, little photos in the back in black and white of different guns. I'm like, oh, those are so neat. I'd love to, you know, build these guns. And so I started building guns out of wood and plastic and metal and, you know, just building little replicas and stuff off photographs.
Yeah.
And it kind of went from there into, you know, small toys and stuff on the lathe and eventually go-karts and mini bikes and welding and you know, I guess as an adult, it kind of turned into this, really. I mean,
so tell the folks a little bit about what you're working on now.
Well, so how did
it transform into what you got?
Well, so right now I'm working on a 330 P4, and I'm doing this actually for a guy. This one's not actually a car for myself. Everything else I've ever done up to this point has just kind of been a hobby car. I do it, you know, myself in the evenings. And so, right now I had a guy approach me about getting a carbon bodied car done. And so we worked it out, and here I am.
I love it. I love it. And you've also got a Sharknose that you recently completed for our Sharknose.
Yeah. I finished that in, I think it was 2020. I think I finished it in 2020. And yeah, same thing. I actually went from rat rods. I built a couple of rat rods for myself, and that was kind of my first forte into
carbon, or no?
No,
it's carbon rat rod.
Well, that was my first forte into like chopping a top and things.
Yeah,
you know, I never looked up any videos on anything. I just I had a 27 tall T, and I wanted to build a hot rod with it, and so I took it out beside the house or beside the garage and hacked the top off it, and, and then figured out how to put it back together. And anyway, so I kind of built rat rods for a while. And then one day I just I've always loved the old 60s race cars and things, and just I wanted to know what it was like to to sit behind the wheel of one of them. So
Mhm.
I kind of looked online, did a bunch of research of just scrolling through photos, and kind of came across that, and it kind of met all the criteria of what I wanted and kind of what I thought I could accomplish as well, right?
Mhm.
And and just jumped right in. I had no experience with fiberglass or carbon fiber or building a chassis or
Yeah.
suspension geometry or anything, or even the history. That was another thing, is jumping into that and
Yeah.
getting halfway into it and realizing that there's a lot of history here that I'm I try not to butcher.
So let's start there. So the first one that you did, we'll talk about the two replicas specifically. So you got the Sharknose, and
Sure.
then you got the was it 330 P4?
So I've got I did the Sharknose, and then I did a 206 SP,
Okay.
and then right now I'm currently on the 330 P4.
Okay. So we'll start with the Sharknose because that was the first replica. So walk us through the process from when you first got going on that project. Where were you, in terms of like tools and shops and stuff like that? And how did you get rolling into that incredible build?
I honestly, I was not prepared for it. Really, it was one of those things. I had I'm the kind of guy who like I'm building kind of one car at a time, right?
Yeah.
So like I don't have tons of finances. Like I said, I'm a regular guy, so you kind of sell one car in order to finance building the next one. And so I had the rat rod, and I had sold it, and I wanted to stretch myself a little bit, and so I took that money and dumped it into that project. But yeah, I just kind of found it online, found a photo of it, and looking at the wheels. Could I replicate the wheels? Can I get the tires? That's another big thing, wheels and
Mhm.
tires. Um, is the engine covered? Because of course, if it's got an open engine, well, I'm not. How do I replicate a 1.5 liter V6 or something in that car that if it's exposed, right?
Right.
So I had to look into that, and just a lot of things like that, right? And obviously I was way beyond anything I'd ever done before, but yeah, I
Mhm.
just kind of started. I set up a frame table, and yeah, there's no real magic to it. I just jumped in way over my head.
That's interesting, eh? Throw yourself in an uncomfortable position and eventually you adapt. That's effectively
Yeah,
what you're saying.
I mean that's kind of always what I've done, right?
Yeah.
And I built the whole thing using old photographs,
Mhm.
so no real measurements per se. And yeah, so I started with tube. I went and ordered up a whole bunch of DOM tubing, and got a tube bender, and tried a lot of this and tried a lot of that, and failed at a lot of this and that, and went
Mhm.
back and rebuilt a lot of things. And yeah, when I got to the carbon fiber, or making the molds and things, I have a friend and a couple of friends actually. They work at a studio, or at the time they worked at a studio here in town, that does a lot of work for Disney and Universal Studios and stuff. They do
Mhm.
a lot of sculpting and stuff. And so I went to them and was able to get a tour of their workshop, and kind of look at how they were doing fiberglass and how they were making molds and kind of where the flanges are and how they split them and draft angles and a lot of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And yeah, kind of went from there. And
Awesome. Why the Sharknose? What was it about the Sharknose that really drew you in?
it's just such a good looking car. It's so beautiful. Like, and again, like I say, I mean, the engine's covered, so that was a plus.
Mhm.
Um, wire wheels. It had wire wheels that I could replicate. Um, yeah, it just it had a lot of challenges in it too, right? Like the way that nose is. I knew there would be challenges there that would be kind of enjoyable to do. I knew I could put an engine under that hood, so I used a Hayabusa engine under
Yep.
that hood.
Mhm.
Again, so obviously not even close to a real 156 engine, but a good power plant with a lot of aftermarket for it and things.
Yep.
And then the bubbles, right? It has the bubbles on the back out of acrylic. And
Mhm.
I thought that would be a fun challenge and things. And so yeah, it kind of just met all those criterias. And really, mostly it was a car that I wasn't going to fall out of love with.
Ah, very important.
Yeah, because I mean, like that car took 4.5 years to complete
Did it
because
really?
I
Wow.
was, and it was just funny for me because I mean, I guess it's not that strange. I was jumping into stuff I hadn't done before, but I
Sure.
mean, a hot rod or a rat rod, I could bang one of those off in you know 9 to 12 months,
Mhm.
and this one took 4.5 years. So, but yeah, it met all that criteria, and it was beautiful. Every day I would come out to the garage and not get sick of looking at it, or not get sick of working on it, or not get tired of the project.
I think that's so important, because you could get into something, you get in a year and a half, 2 years, and it just kind of always looks the same until it doesn't look the same anymore, and it's not motivating. And as you say, you fall out of love with it, and you're like, that thing in the garage, you walk by it every day and it bothers you. But you're saying, hey,
and it's taking up space, right? Like it's
yeah,
like I don't know, like the opportunity cost of it, right? Like what could that space be doing otherwise? I see so many, old Camaros and things sitting in people's garages. It's just covered in boxes, and it's sad, for a fact that they had that car since they were a teenager. They kept it, they held onto it, and then when they moved it to their house, when they bought a home for the first time, moved it to the garage, all their buddies came over, they all got drunk, took the car apart because they were going to work on it, and then they all went home. And then it got left there in pieces for the next 20 years. It's just so sad.
Yeah, it happens. And that it's a good way to find a good deal.
I guess.
Right?
Yeah. But I just never wanted to be that guy, right? That thought has always scared me.
For sure.
I don't ever want to end up like that in a project. So if you're gonna do it, you need to love it.
Let's talk about the design. So when you started to design this car, you had photos, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, there's only 2 of these originally ever made. Is that right?
No, they built 7 or 8 of them.
Okay.
Back in 61, between 61 and 62, 7 or 8 of them. And then in 63, they destroyed them all. That's just due to some internal strife and some stuff. There's a lot of legend around it with Enzo Ferrari and stuff. But yeah, in 63, they destroyed them all.
Yeah.
So there's no real ones. There's 2 really epic recreations. Like they're not, I wouldn't even call them replicas. They're recreations, like tool room recreations, in Europe, done by Setford and Company, and they're amazing. They've got real engines in them. The only real running engines of that type in existence. Like they're amazing. They're flawless.
Yeah. I was talking to Steve at Atelier Hugo, and I said that you were coming on the show, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I helped him with some measurements and stuff like that."
Yeah.
So shout out, hats off to him.
Yeah, well, and that's when I knew I was way over my head. So I messaged Steve, and again, I was kind of new to Instagram at the time, and so I messaged Steve, and I'm like, "Hey, like I'm some nobody, and I know you've got like such an amazing skill and amazing talent, and he had worked on these Sharknoses, and." I just want to confirm some of my measurements if you'd be okay with that, and and he was awesome. He was great and shared a few measurements with me and to confirm some of my own thoughts. And it was really neat talking to him about how he came up with his measurements in this, in a very similar way that I came up with mine, just a lot of scale rulers and photographs and just comparison of just overall proportion, really. So that was kind of neat.
Yeah. So when you were doing your design photographs, as you say, were you shaping foam? Were you bending wire? How are you getting to the final product that you could actually lay carbon fiber into?
Yeah. So again, like I said, my friends who worked at this studio, one of the ways that I saw them doing it was they had styrofoam, just huge blocks of styrofoam, and they would just carve them, and I thought that was just fantastic. So I went to a great big styrofoam manufacturer not far from here and ordered 2 big blocks of type 1 closed cell styrofoam, a little bit like very similar to the styrofoam you get in like a box with a TV in it or a stereo in it, except that would be like an open cell styrofoam. Or a loose cell. I got the same kind of thing, but a closed cell, so less air bubbles, and when you cut it, it doesn't so much turn into little beads. So I took 2 big blocks of that and stuck them together and in the full size of the car and just started carving.
Man, there must have been foam all over your garage forever.
It was out of control.
Just a snowstorm in there.
Oh, it was like garbage bag after garbage bag after garbage bag.
Wow. Are you like full Tyvek suit, respirator, the whole bit when you're doing that, or how does that look?
Not then. I am now. I wasn't then.
That's funny. Yeah, man. Is it staticky after you carve it like that much foam?
Yes. It's not as bad as like what you think. Like when like I said, like the open cell foam from like a TV box or something that gets everywhere. Like heaven forbid your kids get a hold of it, and it's all over the house and you'll never get it off. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, like by the end of the day, you sweep up as much as you can, you scoop up as much as you can, and the rest you're, what choice do you have other than, open the door and blow it into the wind?
Leaf blower.
Yeah. And like blowing myself off with the air compressor at the end of the day.
Oh my gosh. I bet now, like if you move half the tools in your garage, you're like, oh God, underneath that cup, it's still foam from years ago.
I find it all the time. I'll be like cleaning under the bench or something, pull out a milk crate or something and look and like, yeah, there's like little metal cutoffs and things from, a car I did
days
6 years ago.
What a memory. Right?
Yeah.
How big are these blocks? Because I mean, the Sharknose is a very slender, almost like a torpedo, right? How big are these blocks when you started?
Yeah, I want to say, like with the two halves glued together, I want to say it was like a solid brick, probably 13 feet long, and 3 feet high and maybe 3.5 feet wide at the time, like to start with. And
you mentioned it was 2 blocks, so they come half of that.
Yeah. Mostly, I mean, you can get them any size you want, really. But I did that just so I could transport them.
Sure. Did the people at the factory wonder, like, what are you building with this thing, man? Like,
no, I don't think so. Because they supply the studio with tons of stuff. Like you wouldn't imagine the size of things that, you walk, like I walk past in that studio, or you go look at Disney or something and see these just huge sculptures. Like inside of that is foam. Like it's all fiberglass. It's all painted. It looks amazing. But inside of it, like that thing is like thousands of pounds of styrofoam inside. So I mean, so that a place like this, they supply to everything from home insulation all the way to crazy things like that.
Very cool. And then you just start penciling your lines on and shave it down.
Yeah, that car I built a hot wire for it, and then I actually have a friend. I have a friend with a great big plotter, like a great big printer. So I was able to do some sketches and things, and then have him print that in full size, and then I was able to kind of stick it to the car, or tape it to the side of the styrofoam, and then draw my lines and general outlines. And then I had a friend come over and we kind of did my hot wire, and I worked on one side with it and he did the other, and you try to work at the same speed. And so I wouldn't do it like that again. Like obviously, again, like I learned a lot of things from it, but it worked out.
How would you do it again? If you had to do that process in repeat, what would you do different?
Well, first of all, styrofoam is really expensive, surprisingly expensive, actually.
I was going to say, like 4x8 sheet of styrofoam for installations, it's not cheap.
Well, yeah. Well, and then you think, right? Like you're buying, however many sheets, but I forget the price, but I remember when I ordered it, I was like blown away. Like it's just styrofoam.
Yeah.
But yeah. So on the 206, what I did is I built a wood, because it didn't need to be styrofoam all the way through, right? I really only needed maybe 8 inches worth of carving room. So what I did on the 206 is I kind of built somewhat of a wooden buck, I guess, and then covered that with styrofoam. And then I was able to work from there. So that was obviously a lot more affordable, and then again, like I didn't use the hot wire on it. I carved a lot of that with a chainsaw, and that, which again is a lot faster and more fun.
Yeah, and even more dust pellets, foam pellets floating around, right?
Right. Right.
Because there wouldn't be anything with the hot wire, right? It would just go through like ice cream.
Yeah. One of the problems with the hot wire is you're cutting through, because again, it's hot, right? So if you melt styrofoam, it's essentially a plastic. So then you get this thin candy coating film on it of a hard plastic, right? So then as you're sanding, to your final shape and stuff, you kind of have to work your way through that, which is really hard.
Yeah.
So, or it can be, right?
That's actually one interesting similarity between metal and carbon. I mean, you're using the buck to make a negative or a positive for your molds, right? But I mean, whether you're shaping metal to a preformed object, or whether you're shaping something you lay, like fiberglass or carbon or whatever, I mean, you have to start with something. Like there's a true similarity there. Like you have to say, okay, this is the thing I'm building. Whatever I put on top is up to me. But I mean, at the end of the day, you got to start with the shape.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the nice thing is, like I don't know, I look at you guys with your wood bucks and or even the wire forms and stuff, and like it's mind blowing to me, right? Because I can look at my positive and I'm working on my positive and doing whatever shape I give it, whatever finish I give it, whatever polish I give it. When I mold it, that's what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
So, like I've had molds before where I've molded something with, let's say, like a little vinyl printed sticker on it or something, and you can look in the gel coat after in the mold, and you can look in the light, and you can literally see the ink, the difference in the colors of ink from that sticker, right? Which, with the naked eye, you'd never even be able to feel on the sticker.
Sure.
And, like, it's that good. So if you have a mold that's been sanded to 120 grit, that's exactly what you're going to, or a plug sanded to 120, that's what you're going to get in the mold in every single way. Whereas with metal shaping, I mean, you put it on there, you check it, you go back to the wheel, you roll it, you put it back and forth and back and forth. Like, what do you do if you overbend it? Like,
it's very similar in the wheel. Like if you put a panel in the wheel and your wheels aren't polished, you get that unpolished surface finish on your panel. And if you put that same panel in the English wheel and your wheels are mirror finish, you get a mirror finish on your panel. Like
it makes sense, eh?
It just kind of prints itself on there. It's true.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's go next step. So after you built the foam block, now you got this shape. You're like, okay, cool. Here's my car. This is the body. Where do you go from there?
Well, the worst part is, so when I'm ready to make molds off of it, the polyester resin will melt the styrofoam.
Yeah.
And so you need to seal it with something that's not going to melt it. So yeah, once it's kind of all done, then I have to seal it with paint, which I've there's a lot of different ways to do it. What's worked for me, and again, I'm cheap, I'm in a home garage, so I've just used regular latex paint, a bunch of coats of regular latex paint, and then you sand all the orange peel out of it, and then from there, now that it's sealed, then I can go into something like a lacquer or whatever shiny finish I want to bring it to. And then from there, kind of once I've got that, then I can create flanges, or you have to look at it and decide
where do we split
the draft angles. Yeah, like how to split it, because you can easily lock something into a mold by not considering where your draft angles are.
So, yeah, that happens in metal too. You get a panel on the back and you're like, oh geez, how am I going to get this thing off?
Yeah.
It can happen. Especially if you're welding right on top of, like, I mean, in your case, you're doing right? That unbolt. But if you're welding on top of your back and you lock yourself in, like maybe the whole front clip assembly goes on over top of a wire form or something like that, and you weld it all together, you can't get the thing out, you got to cut it out, and then you destroy the buck underneath. Did you ever lock yourself in where you're like, oh geez, what am I gonna do?
I haven't. I've never locked myself into anything yet.
That's good.
Which it's funny because, like, now working on this car, like once you and I found suspension geometry is the same thing. Like once you've been in it like every single day, and I'm looking at this and working on draft angles or suspension geometry stuff, you start to see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Like I can look at like a toy, I pick up a kid's toy, and in plastic you can always see where the split angles are of the mold. And I can look at a toy and be like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Like that I would have done it the same way or in the same spot, right? Or suspension geometry, when you get all that set up and you actually learn and understand how all that works. And so with the Sharknose, once I had learned all that and set it all up, I started looking around at cars with big wheel spacers on them, or lifted trucks or lowered cars. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like he has no idea that he's done this and this and this to his suspension, and like kingpin inclination and on and on and on.
Yeah. That must have been a ton of research.
I'm a total loser now that I see all that, right?
Geeking out over suspension, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you were doing the research for that, I mean, obviously it had to function, but like number two, it had to look kind of sort of period correct. How did you have to blend the two, or did that just come naturally?
Yeah, I mean, because obviously my car's got different weight ratios and things like that. So there was some of that I had to take into account. And then, and then modern shocks, like I use shocks off of I think an R1 crotch rocket for that. Again, because I could get my hands on them. And I mean, somebody else has spent $1 million or more engineering this. Like, who am I to, under engineer that? So that was a really good option. So some of those things, obviously my stuff was a little bit different, and just given my specific car, but overall it was pretty close. I made sure all all the design of the upper and lower control arms and stuff is very similar. The actual layout of that was all very similar to the original.
Did you make the control arms as well?
Yeah. I made all the uprights, made all the control arms. Yeah.
Wow, man. Did you record the man hours in this?
I didn't. I think kind of doing some basic math. I think I probably have about 2,600 hours in that car.
That's pretty quick. That's pretty quick.
Yeah.
I mean, over 4 years, you're 500, 600, 700 hours a year. So yeah, but I mean, that's pretty.
Yeah.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, I'm out in the garage anyways in the evenings. Like, come home from work, put the kids to bed, and the wife likes her quiet time, so I come out to the garage and we work out here from basically 7:30 or 8 o'clock till 11 o'clock. Sometimes 1 in the morning.
Wow.
So and then you add that up to 4.5 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's talk drivetrain. You mentioned the Hayabusa motor. Was it? I'm almost positive this was you, but I think you used a Jetta transmission or a Passat transmission.
No, that's on the 206. The 206 has a Passat transaxle.
That's what it was. I saw that video on YouTube and I was like, man, it was like a Nissan 350Z motor or something with right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that drivetrain when we get to that. Okay, we'll stick to the Sharknose. I'll get off topic. Hayabusa motor. How did that come to be?
Again, so when you're building a car like this, I'm on a shoestring budget. I'm a regular guy. I don't have, $30,000 or even more to go and get an alpha motor or something like that, right?
Sure.
And then again, I also have to consider modern horsepower, modern serviceability. Can I get parts for this? Is there aftermarket for it? Right? Yeah. I'm in Canada. Like I don't have access to an alpha motor or something like that, or spend my entire, budget or half the budget on the car on just the motor, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to balance that, and then find a respectable engine that's respectable. It has aftermarket. It's modern. It's got the right kind of horsepower. It's got the right kind of sound. That's another thing with that motor. I wanted it to have a nice high revving sound with high compression and stuff. And so the Hayabusa motor just kind of fit, fit all those boxes. And so I just went online and on Marketplace, I think, and happened to find a guy selling a near mint condition bike and for a good price. And so I went and looked at it, and I didn't want to tell him what I was going to do to it. Yeah. So I'd never ridden, I don't ride bikes. I'm not a bike guy, but my brother-in-law is. And so I brought him along, and so he kind of took it for a test drive.
Yeah, here, go ride this thing, please. I don't know. What do we do with this?
Tell me if it's good. I don't know. And the guy, and of course I'm standing there with the guy, and he's like, "What do you mean you don't ride bikes? Like, this is your first bike?" I'm like, "Yeah."
That's
like, this is quite the bike for your first bike. I'm like, "Yeah."
Hilarious. Hilarious.
Little does he know I'm going to take it apart, right?
Yeah. And then so for that bike, I mean, when you bought it, I guess it would have came with a title and all that stuff. And you basically just disassembled it for parts, and that was it.
Yeah, that's right. Neat. And then that's another thing is I could have, I could have gone and just gotten an engine off eBay or something like that, right? But part of the issue is you never know what you're going to need, right? You never know what you're going to need.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you buy an engine thinking you're going to get a great deal. Well, now you need a harness, and now you need an ECU, and you need, on and on and on. And by the time you're all done piecing together the stuff you need, well, you should have just bought a complete bike.
Yeah.
And then sold off what you didn't need, right? So that's what I did. It's just easier that way.
Transmission wise, were you using the transmission within the Hayabusa engine itself, or was there something separate?
No, I used the 6-speed sequential that was designed obviously into the bike, which again, it was really nice, right? So when I'm pricing all that out, I got to consider the price seems high to me, but at the same time, you're getting an engine, a transmission, you're getting brake parts, you're getting an ECU, you're getting a wiring harness, right? And then you factor all that together. It's like, oh, this is a really great price. Like, I'm getting a great deal here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the hot rod guys, a lot of the time, the problem is when you're going to go and build a car, if you look at the price of a 32 Ford, or you look at the price of a Model A or a T or something, after you factor in paying retail for all of the little components that you need versus buying a car that's already done, you go, oh my gosh, it's going to cost me twice as much. So unless there's a reason, like you really want to build that car, I mean, obviously a Ferrari is a very different story than a Ford hot rod, right? But like, unless there's a reason you really want to build the car, buy it.
That's the thing. And I don't know if it is really that different, right? I mean, it just comes down to you do it for the project. I mean, and that's kind of always been my thing. Is that's why I've done so many cars up to this point. And people ask me like how I can sell them after you build them. I'm like, well, it's just a car. Like at the end of the day, like
You
they're
enjoy the
cool,
pursuit.
but yeah, I guess I enjoy learning. I enjoy the process, and when I'm done, I get stuck with a car. Like now what? I need the space. Get this out of my face so I can build something else.
Do you still have the Sharknose?
No, I don't.
Tell
No.
us the story there. There's got to be a story there. Nobody built a car that's this beautiful and doesn't have it anymore. Because I've seen your pictures. You driving this thing on the streets through Calgary. The pictures are amazing. You were in Calgary when you were driving, right?
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
hilarious.
so that car technically wasn't street legal, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, no fenders, no headlights, no nothing.
You just went for it.
Well, yeah, and you can get a temporary in transit permit here.
Mm-hmm.
For mechanical purposes. So again, like this is a little bit of you're kind of like exploiting the rule book on this a little bit, but I'm the mechanic, so it's for mechanical purposes. Well, I'm road testing it, right? So, I mean, you get a temporary permit and obviously be smart about it, but go drive it around, take some photos.
Sure. That's cool. Yeah. That's cool. The photos were gorgeous. So you sold the car.
Yeah. So the car went down to Florida. Honestly, there's not really much of a story. I just kind of decided to sell it and put my time into something else and use the space for something else. And yeah, I just kind of listed it and got approached by a guy who was interested, and we worked out a deal, and down the car went. Yeah.
Very cool. That's awesome, man. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. It was actually kind of fun because I put an Apple AirTag in it.
Uh-huh.
I didn't tell the guy, but I put an Apple AirTag in it because I wanted to see it. I wanted to watch it,
Yeah.
Each day. So each day I could see it go, and then I could tell when he got it. I could tell when he got it because it started driving around, in the area that he was at, and then I got a phone call from him, and he's like, "This is the most amazing thing I've ever bought."
Wow. That that's a feather in your cap, because I mean, you enjoyed it. Now he's enjoying it, and I'm assuming he's some kind of a collector. Is that right?
No, he's kind of an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And yeah.
What state did it end up in?
It's in Florida.
It's in Florida. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, good for you. And
thanks.
That means we've morphed into the next project, which was.
Well, so the 206 actually I would say the 206 was probably 75% done at that time. Mm-hmm. And again, it really came down to space. I was working on one car, and I had this finished car sitting here. And again, this is the first car I ever had that was shiny. Everything else has been rat rods and go-karts and stuff that you can bag on. And so here I am trying to weld and grind and paint and next to this thing that's like, got a showroom finish on it. There's only so many blankets you can use to cover that,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just kind of time to get rid of it before I wrecked it. Mm-hmm. and put a little bit of that towards the 206 and finish that off with some extra space.
So tell us about the process of the 206. How was that one born?
So I acquired an AMC AMX from a friend that was passing away, and that was a really cool car, total barn find, like a once in a lifetime story. So I had that car. I kind of got it back on the road and fulfilled the promise to him that I would get it back on the road. It had been sitting in a shed or a garage for 31 years untouched.
Oh, wow.
So I replaced everything rubber on it, got it back on the road. But again, it wasn't me, It was a really cool car, but it just wasn't me. And so, again, one day I was just kind of scrolling on the line and wondering what I was going to build next, and just kind of looking at cars, something that would pique my interest and get me excited. And I came across the 1966 206 SP chassis number 22, which is a Barchetta. So it's like a full spider, like no roof, no nothing, a little tiny windshield this big, open tail on the back, just everything about it. It's like if a 330 P4 and a Porsche 917 had a baby, that was this.
That's what we're coming.
Stopped me dead, like the sexiest car I've ever seen.
Nice.
And so I looked down, I was like, well, I need space and I need financing to do it. So like, well, the AMX really isn't me. I've kind of fulfilled my promise to my friend who passed away, getting it back on the road. So I listed it for sale, and the guy immediately messaged me and And it was just meant to be. The guy was like, I just retired. I've been looking for that exact car in that exact condition, like 390, 4-speed, AMC, AMX, like everything about it. I've been looking for that car for like 40 years.
Oh, wow.
And like, do not sell that car to anybody else. And so, he came and looked at it and just like, he about cried when he saw it.
Oh, man.
Just
That's
him
so
and his
cool.
wife. He was so excited. And so, we made a deal, and I think that car went to the person who was meant to have it.
Yeah.
And that gave me some cash to start on the 206.
I love it.
And so literally the next day I went down and ordered tube and bought a bunch of DOM tube and brought the frame table home. And within 4 or 5 days, I had it all laid out on the frame table, like ready to start cutting.
How did you get drawings or images or something similar for your frame? Because I mean, usually we just see skins of vehicles. Did you take a skin and reverse engineer, or how did that look?
Well, so on the Sharknose, I started with the chassis.
Okay.
And then on that car as well, I started with the chassis.
Okay.
Which I don't know which one's smarter. I'm going to find out, because on this car, I'm kind of starting with the body first. But yeah, so you can find, there's one drawing. It's kind of like the stock drawing. Right. You can find it. But I wouldn't even say it's a blueprint. I would say it's a rendering from 1967-ish or 66-ish. And it's a shop drawing that somebody has scanned and put on the internet. So it's kind of got a top view and a side view and a front and a back view. And it's all fuzzy and everything, right? It was hand drawn on vellum back in the day and stuff. So yeah, I was able to, get that and then print that off and kind of taped it to my garage door and kind of looking at it, and kind of zooming in on online pictures that I could find, right, of other people who are building stuff from scratch. And, and then seeing some of the process of how they did it at the time versus, how I could do it and make it a little more rigid, a little safer, things like that.
Man, it's fantastic. I mean, just to hear, like, I can really tell your passion behind doing these projects. It just seems to fuel you. It's like you're embodying the spirit of what these cars used to be in a modern time. It's really cool.
Well, that's what I like about it. Like I just bought a little plasma cutter robot, and like that's the first fancy tool I've ever bought. But I don't know. There's something about that, of being able to look at like a photograph and make it a reality with just hand tools. I mean, you can plug stuff into a CNC or a 3D printer and stuff nowadays, and have stuff just spit out. Yeah. But I don't know. I want the experience. I want to know what it's like to drive it. I want to know what it's like to build it. And I love the forgiveness of those old race cars. I mean, that's what they were doing. Like, they set up all their suspension geometry on a drafting table,
right?
And then and then they set it all up, and the theory is that it would work. And then they take it around the track and test it, and then they bring it back and modify it. And so it's just, I don't know, there's something to that, it's so pure. I love it.
Yeah. These skills that you've acquired over time, has it purely just been by research and osmosis of what you've seen online, or like has somebody said, hey, let me show you the way that I've done it? How do you acquire these skills?
Honestly, a lot of it is just kind of myself, like just kind of figuring it out, trying it, now and again. I like TIG welding, I guess. Like I had a friend, when I learned to TIG weld, I had a friend
hang on. You don't TIG weld carbon fiber. Hang on a second. Yeah.
Well, the chassis. It is conductive. Carbon is conductive.
Yeah. Let's
throw that out. But yeah, so I had a friend who lived not far from me, and so anytime I needed aluminum done or something, I would take it over to him and he would weld it. And then he eventually was moving, and so his welder went into storage, and I had no choice but to go and get my own TIG and learn, right? So a lot of that kind of stuff. Like I've watched somebody do it a number of times, and then you watch 15 or 20 minutes of YouTube and then go out and try it. I mean, there's no other way really to learn it. And you screw up and you screw up and you screw up, and you get depressed about it. And then you go to bed for the night, and you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, there's my answer. You come out and try again and try again and try again.
So let's talk about the body for this car. When you're actually molding those panels, are you doing that at home as well, or are you doing that in the Disney shop?
No, all of that. Everything happens here.
Yep.
Yeah. I have a friend. I've got a friend with a spray booth, so the paint the big final paint job stuff happens in a spray booth. But yeah, besides that, every single thing happens in this little space that you see here.
I love it. How big is your shop?
It's 22 by 22.
So that's a true 2-car garage.
Yeah. It's a true 2-car garage
Yeah.
with a back alley. That's
So you must be super creative with your space. Like if you got to get all the tools in there, you have things hanging from the ceiling and all that too, or how does it work?
yeah. Like I've got like some ladders and things hanging from the ceiling, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, you gotta be good with your space. That was one good thing I learned really well from my dad is, you have kind of one side of the garage for machines and things. You have another side of the garage for cabinets and storage of small tools and things like that.
Yeah.
And always keep your workbench clean, and don't collect crap that you don't need.
Yeah.
And so I'll put stuff in the attic in the garage, and every year I'll kind of go through the attic and look at stuff like, am I going to use that? Do I need that? Am I holding on to that for a project? No. You know what? Sell it, get it gone. So you have to be kind of very minimalistic, right?
Yeah. You ever get rid of stuff? You're like, geez, I shouldn't have got rid of that. I wanted to use that, but
sometimes, yeah, there are those times where I'll be looking back and like digging through my attic, like I swear I know I have it, and then realize like, I sold that like 9 months ago. Dang it, I probably sold that for $50. Like, I gotta go buy another one for $300.
Yeah. This car you're working on, is this going to be street car or race only?
This will be a streetable car. Yeah.
Excellent. How can you title that in Calgary?
Very similar to a hot rod. So you'll get an assigned VIN number. So with the province, you can, or with the Alberta Insurance Council, you can go and get an assigned VIN number, and then it needs to meet basically out of province type requirements, right? So, and it's fairly basic stuff, right? Like obviously fenders, horn, high beam, low beam, running lights, things like that. Yeah, the basics, and it goes through an out of province inspection, and then you go to the registry and get a plate.
Can you title it to whatever you feel like calling it?
Kind of. So I can. It's technically registered as a home build. Okay. So that would be the make, like the make and model would be. So like the 206, technically whatever it is, like 2023 home build Dino 206.
Right.
Something like that, right?
Love it. That's cool, man. And then your third project, the P4.
Yeah. This one's kind of neat. I don't know. It's just kind of I can't talk too much about it, I guess, just because it's a client car and stuff. Sure. But yeah, it's similar process. He had existing bodywork kind of that had been kind of pieced from here and there, different body panels from kind of some different places. Yeah, and all in fiberglass.
Sorry, I was going to say, is this a glass car, a steel car?
Yeah, all fiberglass. All the body was fiberglass, and so I just taking all these big heavy fiberglass parts and modifying them, like changing a fair amount of stuff, to make things fit better and make things be more correct and things, and then taking molds and out of those molds creating carbon panels.
Creating the panels. Wow, that's spectacular. Oh yeah, I meant to ask you for the 206, the transmission, the Jetta or the Passat transmission. Yeah. When I saw that video, for anybody who hasn't seen his YouTube channel, check out his YouTube channel. We'll link it up in the show notes. But when I saw that video, it was a 350Z motor with a Passat transmission behind it, right?
Yeah.
When I saw that, I thought, this guy's brilliant. Usually when you see a front wheel drive car, you've got a transverse mounted 5-speed or manual transmission. But in this case, the transmission almost looked like a rear wheel drive transmission, but it came out the sides. And I thought, that is so brilliant. How did you come across this type of a set? Was it fluke? Did you know? How did you come across this?
No, I had no idea. So a friend of mine has a replica, an RS200. Yep. He's got a replica RS200. So he had a Renault transaxle in it. Okay. And so he brought it to me to put an Audi or Volkswagen transaxle in from this Passat. And that was the first time I'd ever seen that. And I was like, there's no way you got this out of a front wheel drive Passat. And he's like, yeah, just the junkyard, like a 1.8 turbo front wheel drive Passat. Like 5-speed. Like, okay. Anyway, so I did the project for him and it was awesome. They're super tiny, they're nice and light. Like I could pick it up and sit it on the workbench. and apparently they're strong enough. They'll take 300 horsepower as far as, everything
Wow.
I read or whatever. And yeah, so I did that in his car. And so for the 206, it's little things like that, you kind of stick in the back of your head, like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's a great solution to something. I'll just put that away for later. And
Uh-huh.
then the 206, came across my life, and I was like, that's obviously the transmission I'm going to use, because I
Yeah.
can literally go to the junkyard and get one. And
Did you get was it the whole front cross member as well? Or like the whole front subframe
no,
that you use for suspension as a mock-up, or just the
no,
transmission?
no, just the transaxle. And then
Cool.
I think I took the axle flanges,
Yep.
and and then obviously like the clutch and all that stuff as well.
Mhm.
And then again, like, you never know what you're going to need, but you kind of take everything. And
Yeah.
then yeah, so and then I had the 350Z engine, and obviously they're very different, right? I had a friend, actually. He did work with 3D scanners.
Mm.
So this is like one of the only fancy things I've ever done in my life. Is he came over and 3D scanned the backside of the engine and the transmission, and then we were able to take those two files and overlay them
Oh,
to
wow.
be able to have exact center points, right? And
Yeah.
then yeah, I was able to take that and have that plasma cut out to make myself a plate.
Wow.
And then there was lots of modifying, right? Like, I moved the starter where the starter was going to go. I had to, figure all that out, and then what uh, what ring gear or flywheel and stuff I was going to use, and which clutch I was going to use. And so basically every single thing had to be modified, like from that plate
Yeah.
all the way back. Every single thing, like the fork, the like everything,
Everything.
every single thing had to be modified.
Was it a common transmission? You mentioned a 1.8 turbo, but I mean, was it just like a single year that you could only find it, or?
I think it was. I want to say in the Passats. I want to say it was kind of late 90s, like 96, 97,
Mhm.
something like that, all the way till I want to say 2004,
Oh, okay.
maybe
So like
2005.
readily available.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice.
yeah. And I mean, it's basically the same engine that they put in the Boxsters, the Porsche
Yep.
Boxsters of that era,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So yeah, anytime I find them, I grab them, just because
You're a
you never
hoarder
know,
of
right?
Volkswagen transmissions. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, they're
Well,
a good transition.
it's cool too because A, they're slender, right? Which
Yeah,
is depending on the body you're building, you need slenderness sometimes. But B, it's got that look. It's got the look that you're
yeah.
after. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, especially on that, like, another thing that guys do is they'll use the Subaru transaxles,
Yeah.
and then they'll take the tail, the very tail shaft of it, where it would be the rear wheel drive on them, and they'll, kind of take it apart. There's a way to take it apart and then kind of lock that out.
Yeah.
So it's only front wheel drive, but they're kind of a
Uh-huh.
long, skinny transmission, and they weigh
Mhm.
more. They don't really have that look. They probably hold about the same amount of power and stuff,
Sure.
but they just don't have the look I needed. Right? I need something nice
Yeah.
and stubby with that nice flat plate at the end. And
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
uh,
Kudos to
yeah,
you for
thanks.
figuring out 3 super special cars from scratch for yourself, for customers, from hot rods to like, and doing this all yourself in a 2-car garage. I mean, I think that's so spectacular. I don't think people like you get enough credit because what you're doing really is like it really is amazing by high end standards, by the everyday human builder standards. Like I think your build is spectacular, and thank you so much for being on the
Uh,
show. For me to you,
yeah, thanks, man.
my fellow Canadian. So this is super cool. Where can people find out more about you?
Probably the best place is Instagram. My Instagram is how is that street league, and so I don't really document outside of that, really. I don't know. Instagram is just a really easy place that I can post a photo of progress. So yeah, I just kind of put my progress on there, once or twice, 3 times a week, sort of thing, if I'm working on something interesting. And yeah, you can kind of just follow along there, and people can contact me through that. And I have a YouTube channel as well. I did a YouTube channel for the body work of the 206, because people had asked me, a lot like this, like,
How do you do it? Yeah.
you build a carbon fiber body in a garage. And so again, I'd never had any dealings with YouTube or anything, and so the videos are probably kind of crappy. I don't know, but yeah, I started to kind of document, as I went, and I tried to explain little things as I went, of just kind of why I do this and why I do that. And so, I mean, it's something that I mean, I guess it is rare that people don't build a car from scratch like this, in a home garage. People will kind of farm out the welding or farm out the chassis or the paint and things like that. And there were a few things I farmed out. Like, I didn't do the paint on the Sharknose. That was just too pretty for me to screw up expensive Ferrari red paint. And then the ECU, I didn't do the ECU work on the 206. Again, something should just be left to professionals.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a regular guy, and so is everybody else. I mean, I started with go-karts and woodworking tools. Like, I'm a cabinet maker by trade, and like, if you're not afraid to fail, anybody can do it. It just don't be afraid to fail, right?
Brandon, thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Sheet Metal Shaping Podcast. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.